Absolutely brilliant from Shane Warne.
G'day, legends, and welcome back to the Spin Bowling Podcast. I'm Tom Scholar, your host, founder of Cricket Mentoring, and I have our spin expert, our spin mentor, Craig Howard. Howie, how are you, mate?
2 overs. Very well, thank you.
Great to have you back. This is episode 3 of this series, something I'm very excited about because as we've spoken about previously, the spin bowlers, the spin bowling community around the world are a neglected species. They're a neglected group of people in the cricket industry, and we're hoping that the podcast and our spin bowling community is going to be the solution that a lot of them are probably seeking. So really excited for another episode and to pick your brains and learn from you as one of the best in the world at this, spin bowling. So last episode, Howie, we spoke about the fundamentals of off spinners. And now today we're going to go into more about leg spin and talk about why you keep them separate. And we didn't just talk about the fundamentals of spin bowling in a general sense. But just to revisit what we spoke about in the last episode, off-spin fundamentals in order. Number 1, grip, direction of momentum and amount of momentum, trying to get straight lines to your target. Number 3, your back leg takeoff, getting your knee driving to the target. Number 4 is your back foot landing. Number 5 is your front foot landing and the feet alignment. Number 6 is the release. Number 7 is the back leg drive. And to finish it off, it's the number 8 is the 180 finish. So they're the fundamentals which we've broken down in the last episode. So if you haven't listened or seen that episode, go back and check it out. Howie, I've done enough talking. Over to you now. Why do we keep leg spin separate from finger spin in this technical fundamental sense?
Yeah, it's a great question and something that we thought would be best. To try and put it simply, the leg spin is probably a little bit more complex to do, and it's also a little bit more complex to coach because there are so many opportunities for wrist spinners in the world at the moment. And I think to try and pigeonhole a particular type of style, the idea around the off spin is the ability to bowl with overspin is incredibly important. And to be able to do that, you have to use your body a certain way. But it is much easier to be able to impart overspin from a leg spin position than it is from an off spin position. So there are different ways that you can do it. And the rewards in different formats at the moment are so enormous. I don't think we would want to be pigeonholing people to try and do it a certain way in there. But we could probably categorize the effective ways that leg spin is being bowled in the world at the moment. And you would probably have to break it up into speeds, seam position, and revs in there. So if you think about your more traditional leg spinners, which, I mean, in the 90s and 2000s, you're talking about your Stewie McGills and Shane Warnes and, Anil Kumble was probably a little bit different. Dinesh Kanaria, back to Abdul Qadir, Mushtaq Ahmed, those types of guys. They were probably bowled a certain way, which you would probably categorise them in that from a speeds point of view at around the sort of 78 to 82 kilometres an hour. High revolutions, they're able to bowl with high overspin or moderate overspin. When we talk about their seam position, it would have been that 45. Again, I'm holding up a ball there. It would have been in that 45 position generally.
And for those who aren't watching and don't understand, 45 in a field sense is towards gully?
Yes.
Yep.
Yes, it is. And the ones that are currently doing that effectively around the world are probably your Kuldeep Yadavs, Yuvi Chauhal, and there's probably not too many more. Adil Rashid is probably somewhere around about that. He might be slightly quicker than that. In there, but there's not too many at the moment that are going around that are sort of in that bracket. There's a couple just sitting outside. Tanveer Sanger's probably around about those sort of speeds and revs and seam positions. And then, I mean, I really like Mason Crane from England, who again I'm not sure what age he'd be pushing, probably 26, 27 now. And I think from a high rev leg spinner, which is what he is, and it's the high revolutions, which is what slows the ball down. So that's what brings you back to that sort of 78 to 82 or 83 kilometres an hour. in there. Those guys tend to be slightly later maturers because it takes so much to be able to develop control over it. And if you think about, if you use Stuart McGill, Warne was a little bit of a freak at 23, 24, whereas, a lot of the kids, we get in the system now at 18 and we expect them to be ready to go at 19, 20. And then we sometimes label them and then sometimes we put them in the bin at 21, where really those high revolution spinners we should be encouraging for until they really, that one bad ball and over, or those two bad balls and over becomes one, becomes none, roughly. Sometimes it's different, but I like most of them sort of get into a real maturity around that 25, 26. Stuart McGill was 26 when he debuted for New South Wales and 27 for Australia in there too. So those high revolution spinners sometimes take a little bit longer to develop, and we really need to nurture them because they can be so effective in all formats. And probably the longer formats are where they can have a real impact in as well, even though at the moment doesn't seem to be a lot of want for wrist spin in Test cricket, and that will probably be a discussion that we have at some stage as to why. The next category up with that would be probably your sort of 85 to 90 type leg spinners, which would be your Adam Zampa, Winnie Hasaranga. There's probably quite a number of those that are floating around at the moment who have slightly more overspin on the ball. So it's just probably past that 45 in there, because the higher the speed we get, the more overspin we need for the ball to be able to do something in the air. If you're bowling, 90 kilometers an hour with high side spin, the trajectory just flattens right out, and the batters are able just to pick the length easily and stand there and step hit a lot of the times, or you just don't beat them on length. So they can either sit back and pull, or they can stand and step hit in there. So those guys are around about that 85 to 90, and then you have your 90 to 95 pluses, which are even, so that those 85 to 90 are probably lower, like slightly lower revs in there. I won't put any numbers to it in there, but at some stage we probably will go through some numbers of where the high ones are and where the low ones are. So those 90 plus, which are your Rashid Khans and those types of guys, they are very high overspin. The ball is almost going down as a top spinner, but it just has the slightest amount of side spin either way. So their variations are like this. So like a traditional leg spin is from there to there. Their variations are very, very minimal, because when the ball's going down at those speeds, you need very high overspin for it to even turn, and also for it to drop as well, to try and beat people on length, as spoken. So you've got those guys, and then you have the off-axis leg spinners, which there's a couple, probably a few floating around. Ravi Bishnoi is in there. So those are guys who tend to go like a fairway past the vertical, and the ball knocks off an axis. And generally, they're what they class as a leg break will angle, curve a lot, and skid in. And generally, they have a pretty good wrong as well. So Peter Hatzoglu, who I know you've done a fair bit of work with cricket mentoring, he's probably similar to that type of putt. Sometimes they do struggle to get it to straighten in there. And I'm sure, I think as talking to you, Peter's been working hard to try and get one to hold the other way in there. But they're probably the four main ones at the moment. So it is very difficult to sort of pigeonhole anyone. As a coach, I try to use a bit of science as best I can to when I look at someone, and I try and get an idea of what their revs are and what their speeds are, what their physical capabilities are, before you sort of start to steer them in a particular path. Because not everyone can spin the ball at 2,700, 800 revs like, Shane Warne and those types of guys in there. So it's a matter of trying to work out what their attributes are, and then try and potentially steer them in a path and maybe a format or that might suit them.
Yeah. And last week, I think the starting point with any finger spinner was asking them, what do you want to do? Do you want to play red ball? Do you want to play T20? Because you set them up as a coach, you set them up quite differently for the different formats. You're bowling with more shape and more spin and quicker speeds and whatever. So is that the same with leg spin? You obviously, as you said, you check their science, you check their physicality, but you asking them a question to begin with, where do you want to get to?
Yeah, 100%. And if they are, a high risk spinner who has aspiration to be a long format spinner, then you will probably go down a slightly higher technical path with them to try and make sure that their technical foundation is there to be able to bowl that stock ball over and over and over and over again. If someone comes to you and says, I want to be a T20 player, then you're probably working more on variations and strategy from that point of view. So it's definitely a question, like with everyone, you're generally spending your first session with someone's 20 minute, 30 minute chat on where they've been, the coaching they've had, and the path that they would like to take.
And you mentioned, Howie, about high rev spinners high rev makes the speed slower. Can you go into a bit more detail on that? Why does that happen from a scientific point of view?
It's just, to be honest, I don't know the exact science behind it, but having worked with, with TrackMan technology and also RevGun technology now, there's no one over the course of history that has been high speed and high revolutions. It's because your fingers and wrists are staying longer on the ball, and the revs just take the speed out of it in there too. So, and so speeds, like we talked before, the importance of from an off-spin point of view of those speeds up around those 85 to 90s now. That's because their revs are lower. It's very difficult to put the same, although I don't know anyone in the world that can put the same amount of revs that a leg spinner can. Murali was probably the closest in there because he was almost a wrist spinner with what he did. I think from memory, he was up, seeing him on TV, he was up around the 2,300 revs. Leg spinners, from history says the ones that are 2,400 and above are the ones that have generally been effective in those longer formats in there too. So he's probably as close as you get. Nathan, is around the 2,122 in there as well. So it's a lot easier to put revolutions on the ball from a wrist spin point of view. So the higher revolutions, the ball is going to do a lot more in the air. So your speeds don't have to be as high. When you are revving the ball at that 2,500, 2,600 revs, it's going to do a lot more in the air to create opportunities against batters as well.
Gotcha. And so if I'm a young leg spinner and I say, right, I want to play long format cricket and I can try and get those extra high revs on the ball that you've mentioned, and you just said that if they want to play sort of long format, you'll get a bit more technical with them rather than the strategy and the variations. How much are you paying attention to those 8 things we spoke about in the last episode? How important is the direction of momentum and amount of momentum and everything else? Are they still the fundamentals, or are there something different from a fundamental point of view?
No, 100%. So there's still the fundamentals. It generally comes down to the athletic ability as well in there too. And if I just try and go back to a little bit of my coaching career as well, when I first started coaching 20 years ago, we didn't have a lot of reference points other than Shane Warne in there too. So, and a lot of the leg spinners were all walking up, basically walk, one step, bowl, because supposedly that's what spinners did. Even though we had, so many other examples over history with Australia, like Richie Beno, and we had around the world, we had Anil Kumble and a number of others that had really good momentum and energy. It was very difficult to shift people away from that no momentum. But
that's just so, sorry to cut you off, that's so common that you try and replicate what you see. But I think most people didn't understand the power and the physicality of Shane Warne, did they?
No. So what we ended up producing a lot of mildly accurate leg spinners that just didn't spin the ball enough and didn't have enough energy on the ball because they weren't have the beastly power that Shane Warne had to be able to generate so much force and effort from very little effort in there. So I would often in there, because I was coached momentum and energy. I was coached from a chap called Max Wishart, who was coached by Doug Ring, who was coached by Tiger O'Reilly. Doug Ring was in the 48 Invincibles, and Tiger O'Reilly was before that. And Doug Ring coached Richie Beno as well. So I was coached very much in the vein of the past leg spinners, which was all about trying to create energy and momentum and vigor in there too. So it was very difficult for me when I saw someone that just wasn't creating enough power. I would try and add some momentum to them, and then they would go off to their clubs, and then I might not see them for a month, and I'd come back and they're back walking up, and I'm like, oh, what happened? And they're like, oh, my coach told me that spinners walk up, they don't run up. So that was a real challenge. So when T20 hit and we started to get all these other references that we could coach to, it was a godsend from a coaching point of view, because we were able to say you're probably a little bit more like a Rashid Khan or a Shadab Khan, or or someone like that is going to suit your athletic ability. And if I use Tanvir Sanger as a good example, like he was someone that walked up like everyone, and we had the rev gun and the technology on it, and he was someone that when you increase energy, his revs went up in there, so therefore he had speed and the shape still stayed there. Whereas someone like a Mitchell Swepson, who is beastly powerful, like in high revolutions, and beastly powerful like Shane Warne, the more effort and the more force and momentum and he put on, his revs dropped down. So therefore his shape flattened right out in there too. So his ideal speed range was around that 78 to 82. When he went higher than that, his trajectory and everything would really flatten out. But his revs would go through the roof when he was at that 78 to 82. Because it's your ability for your fingers and wrist to be able to catch up to your arm speed. So that's probably a little bit of the gift that's in your fingers, and in the strength and flexibility in your fingers to be able to catch up with that much effort in there, if you know what I mean. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Yeah. So then it's a matter of looking at their athletic ability and their ability to create power on the amount of momentum that you will have in their run up, and also the formats that they want to play and all that sort of stuff.
So Howie, if we go to a practical sense and you're in the nets for the first time with a young bowler, and they tell you what they want to do, and they say, I want to play all like red ball, test cricket, a long format, and then you start thinking, okay, let's look at you. How do you structure a session? And the second question to that is, how do you suggest any young spinner out there listening to this goes and learns their optimal speed and how much they need to run in without the technology, without the speed gun, the rev gun, etc.? Is it just about using visual and sort of seeing what grips and what doesn't? But how do you structure? Do you sort of watch them bowl for 6 balls and you say, okay, let's try a run up, and then you use the tech to check where they're at there? Then let's try a slower run up. Like, how are you doing in your sessions, and how can others do it without the tech?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, a lot of the indoor centres now will have speed guns attached to them as well, which is one way that they could potentially, if they want to get an idea of what their speeds are. There seems to be a lot of it floating around at a lot of cricket clubs now. But if they don't, generally it's the shape of the ball that we are still looking for. We still want the ball to go up and down, and if you can go up and down at speed and still have a good amount of revolutions, then I think then we know we're on the right path. Because sometimes I will see something and go, no, I mean it's flattening out too much. So I think we're going too hard. I have the ability to check with a rev gun, and generally you'll see that the revs drop in there. So these rev guns are a great coaching tool in there, because you can increase energy, see the revs go up, you can increase them down. So then you can work out their ideal output. Generally, I like it's because you do it for so long, your eye gets pretty good with this sort of stuff in there. So I can generally see it in there. But yeah, for a young spinner doing it themselves, I think it's just going to be a bit of play and see in there. Is the ball still turning? Is it still dropping? Is it, am I getting just driven all the time because my trajectory is just too flat in there? Am I beating people on length in there? I suppose they're all the questions you've got to keep asking yourself in there too, if you're trying to work it out for yourself. In there. But yeah, it is, a lot of it is a bit of play to start with, and just try and get a bit of an idea of what they're capable of. And then it evolves over time as well, because, even, when Adam Zampa came from New South Wales to South Australia, he's nowhere near the bowler that he is now. And even him getting opportunities in T20 cricket were based on a particular strategy that, we went through, based on a lot of what I listened to, what Warne talk about T20 bowling versus red ball bowling and that sort of stuff. We did this wide, slow, fast, straight stuff, and I will actually at some stage show this footage where he got 6 for 17 in an IPL game. It's a fantastic example of a defensive mindset, still taking wickets in there. But his game evolved from that again to higher speeds, and to still quite defensive, as far as he's never really floated up there. he's getting it down there with as much effort and much vigor, but his speeds have gone up and he's stumps most of the time. Now every now and then he'll see him if he's getting taken on, he'll go a bit wide and that sort of stuff. But so he's evolved as well in there, and so yeah, I mean, for where you set out as a 15, 16-year-old doesn't mean that the path can't change later on if things aren't working out as well.
Yeah, and it's so much great advice, and it is a bit of a challenge because if you've got a favorite type of spinner, you might try and bowl like them, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be the best thing for you. So I guess my encouragement on the back of what you've said there for any young spinner out there who's probably still in their teens is to try lots of things the results and get the feedback. If you're a 15-year-old and you're playing under 19s or you're playing a senior cricket, I think it's probably a great idea is to go and ask the batter, well, what do you find? Like, I've gone a bit slower there. Did that have better shape on it? Or did you find like that dropped? Or being really curious for feedback from the batters is probably a great way for a young spinner to take on, to like work out what their optimal speed and those sort of things is. Would you agree?
100%. And I mean, I had similar examples in Sri Lanka recently when, coming from an Australian spin point of view, sometimes it could take a little bit of convincing some of the spinners. So I would always say, go and ask the batter, and the batter would always say, yeah, that's so much better. I found it hard to get to you and all that sort of stuff. So I use the batters all the time to then be able to provide reassurance to the bowlers that what they're doing is working.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, awesome. So I know what I'm talking about there, which is good. So moving through the fundamentals, which we discussed in the second episode, back leg takeoff, back foot landing, front foot landing, and getting your feet aligned. Are they all similar to a finger spinner?
No, they're a little bit different in there, but again, because of the ability to be able to, the ease it is to be able to bowl with overspin in there, but there are still some fundamentals that I do like to stick to in there, which if you want to go through them.
Yeah, let's do it. We've got a little bit of time, so let's just break them down briefly, and then if people want at some point in the future, we can maybe go into some more depth, but we want to try and keep these episodes around half an hour, so we've got a little bit more time if you want to just touch on them.
Yep, cool. So direction of momentum was the first one. Now this one, I'm not as adamant with this. I don't mind a little bit of angle because if I'm coaching a 14-year-old or a 13-year-old with not much muscle memory that has good athletic ability, I quite like side on for leg spinners because of the ease of arm path that it gives you. Because when you're in that side on position in there, if you land at side on a back foot landing, then it just creates a really simple arm path for you. And as you can see, the ease to be able to bowl with overspin there is so much easier than when you're trying to bowl, get your wrist right around and bowl with overspin. So I would, if I have a preference, it would be side on a back foot landing. So that little bit of angle that you can create in the run, as long as you don't then close your feet off, which we'll talk about in a minute. I don't mind a little bit of angle in your run. If you can do it from a straight position, I would encourage that in there too, because then it eliminates that ability to then duck in and then close your feet off and then have to come around or redirect and lean back to your target, which can cause as well. So direction of momentum is as long as it's heading in the direction of the batter, then if there's a little bit of angle, I'm okay with that. If that helps you get into a more side on position, then that's okay.
Okay. So back leg takeoff.
So back leg takeoff again, I'm not as because if you're trying to get into that side on at back foot landing, you will need to, sometimes have that direction will go a little bit more, but as long as you are stepping towards your target and you're not driving towards the leg side, if you know what I mean. So if you are jumping with your back leg going towards the target. If your knee is pointing a little bit towards the square leg umpire, if you're a right-hander, that's okay as long as it is going to the target. Yep. In there, if that makes sense. Yep. Okay. So what the theme is here? The theme is here. There's a bit more room for. Well, how would you describe it? Is it a little bit more room for margin, or just because you're a bit more side on, things are a bit different to finger spin? it's just easier to bowl. It's just easier to bowl with overspin. So you don't like to get into that side on position. It can be quite advantageous because it creates a really simple arm path for you. An arm path is really important for leg spin. Just to explain that as well, like arm path, we want our arm coming over like this, not around like this. Okay, because we need to, firstly, with the first thing we need to do is be able to control line in there, and then it's much easier then to control length. If our arm is coming around, if our shoulders are doing this and coming around, you let the ball go too early, it's full down leg side. If you let it go too late, it's short outside the off stump. So we want our shoulders working in this manner here, which creates this arm path like this.
And that's the vertical plane.
Yes, on the vertical plane. Very much so. It's very important. If you land with your shoulders slightly in that semi position, same thing. We want to maintain that to front foot landing as well, which we'll get to as well. But so if you do land a little bit not as side on, it's very important you then don't try and then get to side on by front foot landing. Because if you watch what my arm did, then I'm sitting on a chair, but if you watch what my arm does, if I land sort of semi and then go to side on, see how it throws behind you, and that's often gets you up past the vertical, and it will knock the ball off the perfect axis axis that we're looking for.
Yeah.
So it's very important that if you land semi, you stay there. So then our shoulders are working like this, not like that, because that arm will get thrown up behind you in there too, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. But for those that are listening to this, I'd suggest to help understand what Howie's doing, he is using visuals on the screen here. So head over to YouTube and you can check it out. And again, you can head into the Spin Bowling online community where Howie will be going into more depth into this. He'll be giving examples. He'll be sharing stuff from the best spinners in the world. You can ask questions. And that's a place where Howie's going to be spending a lot more time, as I said, going into more depth to help spinners. So let's keep moving, Howie. I'm a bit conscious of time here. So back foot landing, you've mentioned front foot landing, about the feet alignment.
Yeah, so we want a feet alignment ideally aligned again, because if we close our feet off, generally what we're going to want to do is try and get back to our target, is we're going to lean back. If you do that, then it's very important that you will have to have that rounder type arm path in there. There's a few that do it. When Indu Hasaranga closes off a little bit, but he still maintains a really nice release point, because he doesn't then lean back to his target. He keeps going towards his target in there, even though his feet are a little bit closed off. Warne at certain stages, he coached feet alignment. If you listen to a lot of his stuff, and Terry Jenner was very big on feet alignment as well. In there, sometimes at various stages he would have his feet slightly more closed than others, but he was definitely, there was times where he was really, really nicely aligned and side on, and generally, as I said, it just changed over time, but he definitely coached it. I know that.
Cool. And then the last three, release, back leg drive, and 180 finish. How do they apply to leg spinners or wrist spinners?
Yes. So we want to be, I'm going to go back a bit. Hang on, I might put this video screen up a little bit just so you can, again, see. So we want to be, that's 12 o'clock there. So we would like to be at roughly around about that. Anywhere that side of there is going to help your seam axis. I'll turn around that way a little bit. Because if you watch, as soon as I start to go past the vertical, watch the seam of the ball, the axis of the ball, how it starts to tilt. So we've gone from this perfect 45 position there, and it starts to tilt there. And you can imagine if it hits here, it's likely to skid on. So release point is very important, and a lot of these other things will affect that release point. So again, another indication that we want to work that vertical plane is we want this left elbow into left hip in there too. And leg spinners can stay slightly more side on for longer than an off spinner would, because it's easier to get the ball with overspin. When you're an off spinner, like, you want your wrist, it's much easier to get your wrist around there, because the more side on you go, the more you've got to get your wrist around to do it. So leg spinners will be slightly more side on at release than an off spinner in there too. So we want that elbow into left hip. A couple of things to think about and to look for. Your palm is facing the batter. when you drive that down, it really drives that left shoulder towards a target in there. So we learned this off a couple of instances we had with spinners that were going a long way past the vertical. So this is supinated and that is pronated. All right. So
just to explain and just give us a description.
A bowl of soup.
Yeah.
So if you're holding a bowl of soup in your hand is supinated. And if it's pronated, you're tipping it on the floor, basically.
Facing the ground.
So palm at the top of your bowling action, when your arm's at its highest, you want the palm facing the batter in there. And then you want that driving down because you can feel how your left shoulder drives towards your target. If you're the other way and you do that, you can feel your left shoulder almost dropping right away underneath you. So that, again, can cause you to go a little bit past the vertical in there too. And again, so through my investigation of this, I'd obviously look at, Warne and McGill had beautiful release heights. You look at their palm down all the way down, palm down. Some of the other ones like Lloyd Pope and others that are a little bit past the vertical in there, they'll be like this, and this arm gets a little bit underneath. That arm drops underneath, so therefore this arm will come back that way as well. Again, I know there's a few visuals on there for those, but if you can. And again, if you want to jump on and we'll chat more about this in the community as well, and I'll show a lot of examples of different plays and how it can cause it. But yeah, so if you can try and drive that left shoulder to the target in there as well, it'll help stay on the plane that we're looking for as well, and not throw us off.
Yeah,
in there.
Brilliant. And the leg drive and the 180 finish, just to wrap things up.
Yeah, same thing. So we want a lot of forward momentum, and we want to make sure that we are working that vertical plane. So we don't want too much, if we're over rotating and we're going past the 180, we've probably worked the vertical horizontal plane too much, which means that it could potentially start to affect our arm path as spoken before in there too. So, aligned feet to a 180 finish again is something that is very important.
Excellent. Well, there's we just touched on technique there, and again, it's hard to break everything down in a video call like this. But yeah, you are going to use examples and visuals and those sort of things for those that are willing to invest their time, energy, and money into joining the community. It's a community for spinners who are looking to be the best they can be. And to be the best they can be, you need good help and support. And that's exactly what Howie is going to be bringing to the spin bowling community. So make sure you head over and check it out. Link is in the YouTube description below. It'll be in the show notes here if you're on listening on audio on the podcast. Howie, anything to wrap up this episode about wrist spin or leg spin and the sort of technical fundamentals about it?
If you are a leg spinner out there, you are the bravest people in world sport. And you just have to be patient because the rewards are so high in there. And there's been a history of so many spinners, and I'm probably part of that as well, that come in and again at 18, 19, I think, and as a cricket community, if the cricket community out there listening, be patient because the rewards are very high. Queensland did an amazing job with Mitchell Swepson. Like they persevered for him averaging 40 and going at 4 and over. When he hit 25. Then he did make some technical changes and some stuff that we might go through at some stage, but he just exploded from 25 through there, and their reward was a Sheffield Shield title in there too. So not many states have had that same same patience. I'm sure South Australia are going to get rewarded. Popey's starting to come again. Lloyd Pope's starting to come again in there too, and there's just been a real history of it where we've got them in young. We've judged them, we've put them aside. But so let's just be patient with them, and you be patient. If you can get to 24, 25, your brain changes a lot. You're able to cope with a lot more things at 25 and 26, and you start to doubt yourself a lot less. Just keep going because there's lots of examples. Bryce McGain debuted for Australia at 30. I'm not sure what his first class debut, but it probably wasn't much before that either. In there too, Fawad Ahmed. In there as well as a 30-year-old, ended up having a wonderful career too. So if you ask any wrist spinner out there, when were the best years that they had, they were always around that 29, 30, 31. They've really started to trust their release, and they no longer were they worried whether it bounced once or twice. all they were worried about was strategy and that sort of stuff. So just be patient, give yourself a break. To all the captains out there as well, just be patient as well. Protect them. Don't over attack with your fields. We'll have a strategy day another day on how to captain.
Absolutely. I actually just took a few notes, and one of those things I just wrote down was how to captain spin, because that's going to be a whole maybe series potentially on different types of spinners, different formats. So much that we can uncover there and unpack there. But we'll wrap up for now. Another awesome value-packed episode that hopefully the listener, you guys have got a lot out of. I know I'm learning from Howie. As I've said, I bowled a few dodgy offies, but going into the depth of the art of spin bowling with you, Howie, is fascinating and awesome for me as well. So, as always, thanks for your time, and we'll see you guys in the next episode.
Cheers, mate. Can't wait.